We are taking a look at Studio One Salon here, and we had these images that there was a little trouble before with getting them centered, and we're going to be taking advantage of the new Revolution slider to make that a little bit better, although most of this is actually just a math issue rather than being that. But we'll take the opportunity to fix both things at once. What we're going to be doing is using groups, and so we click Add Group down here, and we're going to make it a little bigger just so we know that it's going to be big enough to hold those images. And it's not doing anything right now, it's just all on its own. When you want layers to be a part of it, then you simply drag them into there. And we don't need to do anything else with it just yet. We're just going to put them in there. And you'll notice that the group itself is not centered, so we're going to start with centering that. We can click to edit group layers. And we need these to be centered, and before then they were centered in this direction, but they weren't this direction. And once you put them inside a group though, then it starts back over and they're not centered in either direction. You want them centered in both directions, not just the way that you're actually trying to make them be centered. So center your things no matter what, etc. Okay, so then what we're needing to do though with the math is that these things are 250 pixels wide each. We're needing to know, how do we make sure that they stay in the center? Well, we could just line them up in the center and we could try to guess just right, but it's really simple. In fact, I actually just happened to get this one just right with just dragging around randomly, but it's half the width. So if we're wanting them to line up and touch each other, then that's all we're doing is we're saying we need it to be halfway there. So this one would be -125, and so it's halfway. It's that way, and we want to go ahead and get it vertically centered. This one's 125 the other way, and it also needs to be centered that way. And now those things are in there. And since this group as a whole is centered, then we're good to go. The nice thing about having them in there like this, though, is that then you don't have to recalculate if you're needing to make changes later on. So say the width of this changes as you go down to a different size of screen, which right now it looks like we don't have it set up to be responsive, but if it changes as you go down to a different size, then it's easier to move them around as you need to. And those guys are still centered correctly no matter what now, no matter what you do to them. And so that's why we're doing it that way instead. But then we center these both directions. These pictures aren't as big as they need to be, but that's because they're not as big as they need to be. And we can't fix that right now. Go ahead and click Save. We don't really need to have all these other ones. There are a lot of these right now. But I'm going to deactivate all but one of them because we're just using this as a concept right now for this Studio Salon. And so I'm deactivating all the rest, and then on the second one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore what's already here, except for taking note that those are some guy. I'd say that the one on the left is probably the after, huh? And we're going to add a layer. We're going to import that layer. We're going to be doing it from this slider, and oh, it's not letting us do groups just yet. Well, that's too bad. Oh, we'll go ahead and import them anyway. It'll get us closer to what we need to do. They are still at least in their right places in that way. And we'll have to add our own new group. Next time I'll just duplicate the slide. No, I'll just go and do it that way this time. Don't teach bad habits, right? That's what I always tell my son. We don't practice wrong. Okay, so now we're going to edit this, double click these guys, and that's presumably before because they probably weren't able to make his hair grow that quickly. To be the after, and now that guy's good too. And now that should be working just fine. And we can preview it to see, but that'll be good enough for now, because we don't really know all that they're going to want. It's a little bit vague on the structure that we have. So that's good enough for now. You understand the basics.